Assalamualaikum doctor. My name is Nurnisuriati binti Azman. My metric number is 2788858. Today I will present an assignment. I have chosen the title of the Pavlov dog experiment to complete my individual experiment. Here I will describe about the Pavlov dog experiment. First of all, I will present about introduction. The background of figure who founded this theory was Ivan Pavlov, or known was Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. He was born on September 14, 1849 in a small village in central Russia. He has expertise in physiology and psychology, and he is also a Russian doctor. His study went initially focused on theology, but he reading the Charles Darwin about the origin of species had a strong influence on future interests. At the first, he more into religious study, and when he devoted himself to his scientific study, he left off religious study. He served as laboratory assistant of Konstantin Nikolaevich Antimovic in the psychology department of the Veterinary Institute for 2 years. Pavlov published his first book. Pavlov's first book was on the regulation of blood circulation of human relax. Is it conscious or unconscious in the human body? Pavlov finding us very important in the history of psychology. This is because the result of his study of conditional reflex. With this finding, Pavlov laid a foundation of behaviorism as well as laid of the foundation for research on the learning process and the development of theory about learning. The American Psychology Association argues that Pavlov was a well-known figure in the field of modern psychology other than Freud. Classical habituation is a process found by Pavlov through experiment performed using dog. Natural and neutral stimuli will be coupled with repeat conditional stimuli so as to produce the desired response from the aspect of behaviorism. Pavlov won the Nobel Prize for Psychology or Medicine. He became the first Nobel laureate in Russia. A study in General Psychology Study, published in 2002, placed Pavlov as the 24th famous psychologist of the 20th century. Pavlov's classical conditional principle can operate in a variety of behaviorism therapy and in experiment and clinical settings, such as the classroom, education, and also reduce phobia systematic. He is best known for his discoveries with a classical adaptation. Ivan Pavlov had to make a study of how dogs produce saliva in the presence of food. One day, while he was doing this experiment, he noticed that the dog's saliva started to produce saliva before he produced food. Pavlov began resign his experiment. The purpose was to test his hypothesis that when we present to stimuli on a contingent basis, and relationship can occur. Experiment that show the classical habituation or classical conditional is the association of the sound of bell with food. Pavlov rang the bell and feed the dog. So I done with introduction and a little bit about background Ivan Pavlov. Now I will tell you about main content of this experiment. First of all, main content of this learning is the learning process in classical conditional theory by Ivan Pavlov has neutral stimuli that make a correlation with the stimulus in the repetitive. It can also be seen the three methods, namely before, during, and after the classical conditioning process. Based on this law of correlation, Pavlov suggests that the basic process of learning in the formation of a correlation between stimulus and reaction. Pavlov tried to prove this theory of learning by conducting study on dogs. He found that when the dog saw the container with the food, the animal saliva came out. He concluded that the dog had learned to associate the food container seen with the food to be given later. Pavlov continued his study by testing the hypothesis that an organism could be taught to act by providing stimuli. Before conditioning consists of unconventional stimuli given the example as eating and the response which occur as a release but the neutral stimulus. For example, the sound of a bell and no response is not released. During the conditioning process, for the first time, the dog rang the bell, attenuated, and was given the food. This process happened repeatedly. And lastly, after conditioning, the reason among the user is that the last food of the unusual reaction is the release and the user stimuli is the sound of the bell, and finally the user reaction is the existence of the release. So now I want to explain a little bit about the conclusion of Pavlov art study. Have a four component. Firstly, equation. Two, generalization. Three, discrimination. And lastly, attention. Firstly, acquisition is mastery of how an organism learns a new response or a reaction occur in stage. The more often the organism tries, the stronger the mastery of the method. Number two is generalization. Pavlov used the sound of bell in the different tone, but the dog was still saliva. This suggests that organisms already accustomed to the presentation of unconventional stimuli will also produce a dominant response, even if the stimuli are different or nearly the same. Number three is discrimination. Pavlov found that when he changed the tone of the bell, the dog was still saliva. When the tone differs significantly from the original sound, the dog does not saliva. This suggests that the organism in question is able to discriminate between the stimuli presented and choose not to act or respond. Number four is attention. If a normal stimuli, is it bell, is not followed by an unconventional stimuli, is it food? Over time, the organism will not respond. The response was gradually eliminated. This classical conditioning is made through a present behavior. How a present act, this theory or therapy can be applied in certain field. For example, it can be used in the classroom as an example to overcome anxiety, phobia like fear of therapy. Spider may repeatedly show people about picture of spider, why they need realization technique so that the individual can form a connection between the spider and realization. So about important on this experiment is the importance of even Pavlov learning theory of behaviorism. For example, classical conditioning is very important because it will provide an understanding of the conditioning and situation of society, and individually behaviorism clearly can illustrate that a present behavior will be controlled when having certain stimuli. In addition, this theory is important to increase one can be born or learn in daily life. The more often a stimuli is associated with a response, the stronger and prevalent response. So lastly, I will tell about impact. The implication of classical conditioning theory on teaching and learning based on individual or societal behavior according to Ivan Pavlov, the appropriate way of learning is to use dominant stimuli associated with dominant stimuli. The experiment conduct emphasized that the reinforcement or comfort of the respondent at an early stage. For example, for implementation of this theory, could be learning is a positive response. For example, student attention and involvement in study can be fortress top classical conditioning. In addition, it need to be linked to the study exciting knowledge to facilitate the PNP process. For example, if the teacher want to teach the word ball, make sure student can say the word first. When a ball is pointed at him, they show the word cut. The ball accompanied by a ball to get the study response. The activity is repeated several times until the student can pronounce it when the word cut is shown to him. So that's all from my presentation about Pavlov experiment. I hope you enjoy with my video and thank you.
Saliva ducts to the outside of his dog's cheek so that he could collect and measure the spittle. Perhaps he thought the production of saliva might be the result of a fixed nervous reflex, like a knee jerk.
Yes. Note. So 327.
After taking many measurements of spittle, he confirmed that the dogs drooled automatically when their tongues touched food. He called the response the salivation reflex.
Хорошая собачка. Я предлагаю поменяться.
But his work started to run into trouble. As his dogs became familiar with the experimental routine, they started to fill their cheek tubes before Pavlov had a chance to stimulate their tongues. The dogs were learning to anticipate food. Pavlov tried a new technique. He erected screens so that the dogs couldn't see what was going on. Before passing meat through the hatch, he introduced a stimulus that was totally unrelated to feeding. A ticking metronome. At first, the dog dripped saliva into its cheek tube only when the food appeared. But after a number of trials, the dog began to connect the ticking with the arrival of meat. Soon, the sound alone made the dog drool. Eventually, the dog salivated as much to the ticking itself as it did originally to the presentation of food.
Полная. Иди сюда. Что я говорил?
He called this new response the conditioned reflex.
Ага.
Whatever the stimulus, his dogs could soon be conditioned to produce saliva. Pavlov believed that he had discovered how animals learned, even in the wild.